If you look at the cost to the industry of this efficiency is estimated around $50 billion per year of waste.
Hello and welcome to the Banker's Masterclass on Data Utility Models. My name is Brian Kaplan, I'm editor of The Banker. I'm here today with Philippe Chambadal, Chief Executive of SmartStream, and Jo van der Velde, who is Managing Director and Head of Product Management for the Euroclear Group. So welcome, gentlemen. Now obviously we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the data utility model that you've put together. But before we do that, Philippe, the banks we know have an efficiency problem. How big is that problem and what is it they're looking at these days?
Well, I think the problem is one of a lot of manual labors and a lot of inefficiency in reference data management. If you look at the cost to the industry of this efficiency is estimated around $50 billion per year of waste. So if you look at the root cause of why this such a high cost in back office processing, one is reference data is number one. So 30 to 45% trade breaks come from reference data mismatches. And the impact downstream is devastating. So every dollar you spend on data management, you'll spend $5 to $10 on remediation costs for broken trades. And
so you're spending a lot of time recovering from mistakes that you've made, basically.
Exactly, and as any process, any industrial process, the longer you wait to fix a problem, the more expensive it is.
Yeah,
so if you fix a problem in front office, it's going to be probably 10 or 15% of what it costs to fix a problem in the back office. Okay,
so Jo, how urgent do the banks? Because the banks don't like doing these things, do they? Because it means messing about with sort of legacy and existing systems. But clearly they're under so much pressure at the moment, they really have no choice. Is that right?
I think if you look today, the pressure on banks in terms of managing costs, I think that's quite imminent. There are a lot of banks looking today to sort of mutualizing back office processes or back office infrastructures. And I think that if you look at the back office, around 50% of all the work done in back office operations is actually around data management. So I think there's a huge opportunity today to look for new solutions or smarter solutions in terms of mutualizing infrastructure and processes for around data management.
Okay. Now, Philip, you mentioned the number of times that a trade breaks due to bad data. When that happens, what problems does it cause? What are the typical sort of situations?
Well, trade breaks, the bank has to analyze if the cause for the trade break was internal or external. Was it a bad serial instruction? Was it a missing RIC code? Was it a mismatch between a RIC code and Bloomberg code? Is a mismatch on my side? Is a mismatch on my counterparty side? There's tens of millions of instruments and tens of thousands of firms trading with each other. So the security masters on the data has many different states. So for the data to match is very, very unlikely. So the idea is really to see how we can create a proper data model and a unique facility to do the normalization and cleansing of data, so you have one authoritative source to prevent the trade breaks.
Okay, but Jo, the people who are providing this reference data, they're pretty high caliber firms. So how is it that their data doesn't appear to match?
Well, you're talking about the vendors here.
Yes, yeah.
Well, if you look at the quality of the vendors, still you talk about, depending on the data sets that you're talking about, around 75 to 80% of a quality. Now you could say even if that number was 90%, still you cannot get high enough because the volumes, the size of the volumes that people are trading today and the amounts that are at stake are significant. So it's enough that you have sort of a small percentage of breaks, whether that's for a fail or for wrong corporate actions that can have a significant impact for the banks.
Right, okay. Now we mentioned the kinds of issues it causes, Philippe. Clearly it's a trading issue, but it's also an issue around things like corporate actions and dividend payments. Can you explain what goes wrong in those kinds of areas?
Corporate action, same thing as the reference data on end of the pricing issues. Corporate actions, typically the firms are 50-60% efficiency. The impact on could be devastating in terms of trading losses. Asset servicers, custodians, prime brokers. Need to get to even Euroclear need to get to the data to a high level of accuracy. And the problem is, again, same idea as reference data. If you solve the problem for yourself, you're only as good as your counterparty's data. So if you think you have good corporate action, you have to better make sure that the counterparty has the same data. It is pristine data.
Yeah, okay. So Joe, I mean, finally, I mean, when you talk to banks about this issue, I mean, what is their major worry in terms of, I mean, it makes intellectual sense to go to a system like this, but what is their concern about the transition?
Well, in terms of transition, well, the root cause, if you look at banks today, of course, there's a significant amount of cost involved, whether that's infrastructure maintenance or whether it's operational cost. I think the drivers are very clear for banks, why they want to go for a new or smarter solution. I think what is important for us, and that we'll maybe cover that later on, is on the solution that we propose, is that we, on the one hand, we come up with something that mutualizes infrastructure and mutualizes operations for the firms, but at the same time, it has sort of a light footprint and is easy to integrate within the bank's infrastructure, because it's easy to come up with the right data, yeah, but then the second question, of course, is how do you get that data into the firm? Yeah, so you need to make sure that you cater for client-specific rules or client-specific processes, and you do the mapping between what we put out as sort of data and how that maps into the internal infrastructure of the customer.
Okay, so now you said the magic word there, costs. So let's get back in the next chapter to talking specifically about what those costs are.